Today's episode is for the entrepreneurs, the rule breakers, and the people who looked at a broken system and said, nope, I am not accepting that. Today, we're joined by Rebecca Harris, founder and CEO of Diligent Data. Rebecca did not just start a company, she built a company, and then she challenged an entire system that told her, this is just how it works. She's a woman-owned founder in a compliance-heavy industry, and she has gone toe-to-toe with New York State over access to court records. This conversation is about building, power, persistence, and what happens when founders refuse to stay quiet. We are so glad you're here.
I started the screening world by actually joining my uncle, who was the founder of Diligent Data. He had founded it in the 90s. And I was in my early 20s. I was just finishing up graduate school. I was getting my MBA, and I knew I wanted to be my own boss. He helped me learn the business on what he did. And then gradually, for a period of about a year, I took more responsibility, and then he took less. And we signed the paperwork officially selling it to me. And it's been my business ever since. And I think owning your business in your 20s comes with a lot of challenges. It was all I focused on for, I would say, a good decade of my life. But growing it, I've really learned to love it. And I really appreciate now what it's done for me now that I am a little bit older, and to see the independence that I had in my 20s that a lot of people don't have. And I'm really appreciative of it.
That's awesome.
I would have to say that entrepreneurship is hard at any age, coming from somebody that decided to change careers at almost 40 and kind of entering this world. I get what you're saying. When you're young, like, you just think differently, you have less perspective in life as a whole. So hard to give that level of dedication to something to make it grow in the way that you did. And I think that's amazing that you did that in such a young age.
I made some mistakes and I've learned. And, I think that's with any business owner, you grow and you learn more, and then you don't make those same mistakes again.
When I opened my first business, it was when I was young, and you could tell because I made a lot of really risky decisions. I'm like, oh, whatever, I'll take that fight. It's fine. I'll spend $80,000, get in debt. That's okay. But I did not make really great moves the first time around in my business. So I'm glad that you didn't have to deal with all of that in your early 20s and that you took the other angle.
But risk comes with being an entrepreneur, and is like, which risk are you willing to take, really, right? Like, and then you're betting on yourself versus betting on other people. And when you have a team, you're betting on everyone and yourself at the same time. How do you overcome the challenge of creating a culture for more teammates to come in? How do you hire correctly? There's so many challenges, all learning as we go, and that's amazing. But what I really want to know is, on year one, what was your biggest challenge?
So I think that one of my earliest big problems was the fact that we had existing clients, and now I was the owner and I had to build that relationship with those clients so they didn't end up moving to either another provider or another CRA. And cultivating those relationships, is difficult. When you go from zero and to say, hey, this is Rebecca now, she's going to be your point of contact. You have to create a reputation for yourself, create a personal brand, and then become someone that your clients trust. Because if I didn't have that the first year or so, those clients would have left me. And I'm very proud that there was a multitude of clients that started with my uncle and are still with me to today. And they have not moved to another provider because they trust me. They trusted me then, and they still trust me now.
That was a huge win. What was your biggest learning? We don't like to call failure, but what was the biggest thing you messed up on that really made a point for you to never do that again on that first year?
There were some things I did to keep clients happy that might have not worked out for me in the long term because it was giving too much to them without really getting anything in return. I dropped my prices too much or tried to overpromise things that weren't realistic. And I did it because I was younger and inexperienced and I thought I could make it work. And I wish I hadn't done some of that, because some of those still affect me to this day, some of those decisions.
You set some
Yeah.
expectations that shouldn't been set. And I
Yes,
think we
and
can all relate to that.
maybe I let clients quote unquote bully me a little to try to, what they wanted from me that wasn't possible.
We all do that, especially in sales. We're like, oh, I want to close this deal. I'm going to do this. I'm going to save this client, or any of those things. And we all drop the price a little too much sometimes, but at least you learned. All right. So here's my favorite part of this interview. I am so excited to talk about this. So you build your company, you're gaining traction, you become a name in the industry. Then New York decides to throw you a curveball and you hit a wall. It's not about tech or who you hired or clients or you drop their prices too much. It's about access. Tell us about the situation.
So this happened, I remember it like it was yesterday, November 1st, 2024. I had a researcher that had to physically go to one of the courts, and she called me and said the books that we use aren't here. And for reference, a lot of counties in New York at the time, they didn't have their things on computers, their indexes, and this county in particular used really large industrial style binders that had the index of convictions printed out by surname that you had to like manually flip through. And that was her job. And she went to the courthouse and walked upstairs and they were gone. Two things went through my head. Well, okay, they're just reprinting them. We skip today, we come back tomorrow. But then slowly during the day, I found out that multiple counties had all removed their binders at the same time, and that this was a coordinated effort to remove access across the 3rd Judicial District of New York. The main county that this happened, Schenectady County, is actually the county that I live in. All of my questions to the clerks were completely unanswered. And it took several months until we were able to restore access. The judicial district, they never answered us. None of my FOIL requests were answered. I never got an answer from any of the clerks. The county representatives never provided a reason for the removal. I was told that these access records that we had for the last 15 years should have never been available, and that everyone needed to go through the OCA, which, if you know anything about New York, is the statewide search at $95 a name. So going from free access to suddenly $95 is a lot for most people to handle. That's a lot of money. So it took 6 months or so with me and my attorney to get the records back. And they never actually gave us the binders back with the index. We never won that fight. What we did get is for those counties to become clerk assisted counties. So you still can get those county records. You have to pay the court fees, which $20 is still a lot cheaper than $95. So most people, myself included, would consider that a win.
Wow.
But talk a little bit more about the part of you being the one moving this whole effort forward alone.
Yes.
I love that part, and we shouldn't skip it.
Yes. So when we first had the records removed, things spread very quickly like wildfire, and I was getting calls from clients saying this county removed access or this is gone. Why, what's going on? And I didn't have an answer because the clerks and the employees would not give me an answer. They told me that this is just the way it is and that's it.
No legislation passed or anything, none of that. Just somebody woke up one day and decided to give you a headache.
Yes.
Wow.
And that's the thing. To this day now, nearly over 2 years later, I still never got an answer on why this was done. But I told clients and said, hey, this is what's going on. I need a couple of days to figure this out. So I said, we're just going to hold all of the work for a couple of days. We can catch back up, but I needed to make phone calls to the judicial district because I wanted to see if I could get a meeting with the chief administrative judge, which I thought who had maybe made this decision because it affected only counties in one judicial district. And maybe I could get it reversed. And that didn't really go as planned. And it took months of them telling me that it wasn't going to happen. And I didn't really like that answer because they couldn't provide me a reasoning. Like you said, Megan, there was no legislative changes. There was no, new laws, nothing from the governor that had happened. It was just November 1st, you wake up and they decided to remove the records. And I took that very personally because the county that started this is the county that I live in. I live 5 minutes away from the courthouse. I had been going there for nearly 10 years every day. I wasn't going to just take a no as an answer. So I got my attorney involved. And eventually, I found, after months of research and my attorneys going back and forth, setting up meetings and this and that, two different arguments that we use to regain access. One of them is Judicial Law 255B. And yes, I still have that memorized because I will never forget it. And it essentially says that a court employee must search public records if someone from the public will pay the appropriate court fees. So I went to Schenectady County. Per my attorney's recommendations, I bought a sample search. I bought a check for $20, and I said, please do this search. And I cited my judicial law, and I said, here is my $20. I am prepared to pay. And they rejected it.
Goodness.
And the appeals court said, essentially, no, you are, as a court official, a public employee, and you work for the public. If they provide, enough for you to find the case, that's enough for you to do research. You can't dictate, they have to do X, Y, Z. So after my test search from Schenectady was not processed, and they rejected it, I brought that to my attorney, and with those documents, my attorney wrote a very strongly worded letter to Schenectady County Court, essentially citing legal arguments of 255B Judicial Code and the appeals court decision, and we were prepared to sue. That was the first time that I realized that they had no legal standing to land on. There was nothing for them to fight against that. Because they can't fight against their own court system. That would be like cannibalizing their own head. It doesn't quite work like that. So I let my attorney send that letter, and essentially we gave them a 2-day notice to respond, or said we would sue. And my attorney got a call from a higher administrative person that said, we're looking into this. Please hold. And it took about 3 to 4 weeks. But essentially how it resolved is we did not sue. And there was a memo that was put out by one of the highest level people at the Office of Court Administration that got sent to every court in the state that said, if someone comes with a name, a date of birth, and an appropriate fee, that you cannot deny that, and if that is public record, you must provide them the results, and that they do not have to provide a case number.
Sounds like what New Jersey tried with putting it all online and then charging people with like $8 a minute or something to search, like after COVID. It's crazy. So I'm going to ask you a multi-part question. Did anyone join you? And then what did this fight cost you? I know obviously it cost you money to pay your lawyer, but emotionally, operationally, what did this really cost you, like when it comes down to it?
So to answer your first part, no one joined me. At the very end of the fight, PBSA joined a little, but at the very beginning, I didn't even know PBSA had the resources. I was less involved then to even assist, but no other wholesaler research company had joined me in the fight at all. They obviously got the benefits from it after that memo came out, but they did not. In fact, Every company that I talked to, when I said I was planning on fighting this, I was advised not to because they didn't want to rock the boat. And they said no, because if you lose, they could cut off access to the whole state. And I was specifically told that I should not fight back and I should just not do anything. So no one joined me. And financially, the fight cost about $8,000 to $10,000 in attorney fees. It cost me about $100,000 in lost revenue during those 4 months. And it cost me a lot of stress financially, emotionally. It was difficult. I had employees that now were worried about their jobs, that I had to try to give them work in other areas because it wasn't right that maybe their job was temporarily on hold. They still obviously needed a paycheck, as we all do. But then just stress. I'll say it, I was obsessed with this. And I think I read the judicial code back to front in New York like 5 or 6 times, looking for things to help me. I was obsessed, and we got it resolved, and we finally were able to figure things out. But it took from, like I said, November 1st to Valentine's Day on 2024. So it took, long time.
Well, happy
So
anniversary.
I was going to say, this is about the 2-year anniversary. So this is so relevant to be filming right now at the almost 2-year anniversary of this whole situation, which is quite wild to me. A couple of things. I know the law is about interpretation, right? And we all understand the whole concept, but it's so interesting that, a court clerk or somebody in charge can interpret it in one way, and then somebody comes in or somebody else decides they're going to do things differently, and they're just going to interpret it the other way, and that's it. And people tend not to fight because it is costly, emotionally, financially, in all the ways you spoke about. But you aren't about to take no for an answer, and you went after it, and you did it yourself, and that's amazing. Why do you think everyone else backed out and you didn't?
I think I felt very personal because some of the counties were the counties that I, live and work in and, have access to regularly. But I think the second part of it is because I knew New York. I'm the expert in New York. I know how things work. And when someone doesn't understand things, it's easy for them to accept changes because they don't understand everything completely. So if it's a company that doesn't do their own research, or if they just use contractors, they might not understand. So then they can't fight it because they don't really have a full grasp of everything that's going on to begin with.
I think that's definitely a piece of it. I think the other piece that you're not speaking of is courage, right? I think there's a big part of that we can't ignore, because going into unknown and investing money, time, effort, and emotional, or you could have just said, well, I'm charging my clients $98 and that's how we're doing this moving forward, right? But you had courage to say, no, I can do better than this. I understand how this works and I'm not settling for this. And that's really the whole idea of a sole entrepreneur, right?
To me, because you said nobody else really wanted to get involved. Just leave it alone. Leave it alone. I've heard that a lot of wholesalers and other companies also feel the same way about Advocacy Day, and that some of the lawyers also say, no, don't go. And that, I never understood that. It's an integral part of what we do. It leads me to my next question. I want to know what you think about, do you have any predictions on access going forward?
So I think 2 parts of that is one, I did do it for my clients. One of my favorite clients is locally here, is a domestic violence shelter. And obviously, being a nonprofit, they don't have the budget to suddenly increase their background checks from, whatever the cost is, and then add it $95 to that for each individual. And that's what was For me, one of the most frustrating parts is the county saying, oh, well, just do this and pass the fee on to your client, no big deal. And they didn't seem to understand not every company makes a profit. Some companies, they need background checks, but they can't pay $150 for each background check they're being done to go through the state. Part of the reasoning, I think, why meeting with lawmakers in particular is important, because you have to tell them these records are being used for this purpose. I've made lots of phone calls to different courts, not just in New York, around the country, maybe getting a document, I need copies of something, and sometimes they're very slow. And I say, this is holding up someone being employed. That's frustrating, but you need to kind of put a human element. We are in the work we're doing for people to be hired, volunteers, tenants, and our work matters.
And when you raise the price so much, I think about that domestic violence shelter. I've heard this with verifications lately. Everybody's like, the prices are so high on things, we're just not doing it. That is such an awful situation to be in. What do? Like, spend the money that they don't have, or just let somebody work there and hope for the best? People don't think this through. Like, legislators don't think this through, and the courts don't think it through.
Yeah, I think legislators don't think it through because they have so many other things on their plate that it comes back to us presenting the problem and the urgency. And I think that's the part of Advocacy Day that's really important, right? But the other side to that is, I think Rebecca's on point. People lose sight of what we're even doing in the first place, and the human element of on the other side of the screen. Now, let me ask you this. If you had a policymaker right here in a room with us, right? Here's somebody, you had access to them. We didn't have to wait for Advocacy Day to make that happen. What would you tell them, like, about the process and how it could work better?
I would explain first why we need this info and, give them an example. I have seen people in California, for example, post that they've had a job offer rescind it because they have a common name and the background check company cannot confirm that these records belong or don't belong to that individual. And I think that's ridiculous. If someone has a common name, that is not their fault. My husband's name is Joe Smith. Like,
man, it's personal to you.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And realistically, I think those people and those end users also need to help with the fight. PBSA has done a great job trying to convey that to end users in California and like South Carolina recently, to get them to help bring that to lawmakers. Because if a person from your state tells their elected officials that they are getting their own job offers rescinded because of their policies, how can that be ignored?
Yeah. I saw one of those posts. It was a woman. I can't remember the job. It was like a C-suite job. And she had all of her background checks done, international, all her verifications, everywhere she's lived. And then California. And her job was rescinded. And she posted about the CRA. And I got on there and I defended the CRA because I was like, this isn't the CRA's fault. You need to call Gavin Newsom. This is not your CRA's fault. This is policy, pure and simple. Rebecca, as an entrepreneur, especially a female entrepreneur, so you're deciding whether to push back against a policy or play it safe. What would you tell her?
Push back. I've played it safe in the past, and playing it safe, sometimes it's not playing it safe because you're just letting things happen to you instead of making things happen. If I look back and I think about what happens if when this started happening that I didn't question it and I just emailed all my clients right away and said, by the way, this is what we're doing. Not only would I have lost and continue to lose more money because I'm not doing that work, but also eventually I feel like maybe more counties, we don't like researchers because, they're sometimes a pain in the butt and they need all this info. Why don't we do what this county did and just tell them to go through the OCA? And then what do you have left? Any counties that are willing to do it? Will all the counties just remove access? And then you have the entire state cut off. Maybe those end users who used to do county searches on their background checks who can't anymore, they have to put that money and they can't do other things they want to do because their background check budget has increased so much. Maybe they've had to not hire as many people or reduce their own marketing efforts for their business. It's just a ricochet effect. And
or not screen at all, right?
Or pick the cheap $8 check that Izzy came upon.
Exactly. Yes. And not screen at all, which is another route they could take. But beyond that, not doing anything was going to lead you to not have a business. And I think that's really important in the big picture for us to talk about. Just like you said, not doing anything is doing something. You're choosing not to act is a choice. And what does that implicates to you in the long run? I think a big part of being an entrepreneur is long-term thinking, but a lot of people don't think that way and don't think about the implications. They just think about, oh, how much money am I going to lose right now with these lawyer fees? Or what does that mean for me emotionally? I'm just going to have to settle for this, when at the end of the day could have been the choice of you closing your business altogether in the end.
So what is next for you? Is there anything left for you to do?
There are, I feel like there's always new fights. Sometimes you just have to find what I feel like motivates you. This was very motivating for me. There's other things that I want to work on. I have been working on internally, like new marketing strategies, new business development, and finding things that excite me that I want to move forward with. I think one of the best parts about when you're own your own business and an entrepreneur is you can decide the direction you want to go in. Lately, we have been trying to do more automations using some AI when we can, because we know that in this industry, if you don't innovate, eventually you will get pushed out. And we're seeing that now. This industry has a lot of mergers and acquisitions that have been happening the last several years. And I think it can be really difficult for smaller companies to compete. But what I can compete on is, well, I have the most experience and I can prove that very easily. So just about finding what you can do different that maybe someone else can't.
But also pivot when you must, right? Like using all the tools. We talk about this a lot. My take on the future of this industry, and honestly, with the economy the way it is, most industries, it's going to be a combination of AI and outsourcing. I don't really see any other path. That's my take on this. And it's really tough to adapt to all of this when the demand continues to get greater and greater, right? Staying innovative, learning how to pivot, and knowing what to do to change the direction for you to show the differentiator between you and everyone else those are the only people that are going to be able to survive, honestly. But doomsday's over. Let's end with a good question. If you have a new entrepreneur, especially women, right? I think we're all women here, obviously, but like as women entrepreneurs, we know our own set of challenges that we have to deal with as women overall. So if you could give 3 tips to somebody that's just thinking about starting their own thing, their new venture, that wants to break away from working for somebody else and working for themselves, what would you say are like the 3 things?
Yeah, I would say the first recommendation I would have is finding something that you are an expert in and niching down into that very specific thing. No one person can do everything. And if you try to do too much, jack of all trades, master of none. So if you want to open your own business, you want to, work for yourself, you need to find what you can do better than 99% of the rest of the people in this industry. And then you can rise to the top because you're focusing on something very specific. 2 is keep going. It is not easy being your own boss, and it will be a lot of time. Maybe you have to work double shift between, a day job and a night job on your own, or you have to get a job in another industry while you're launching. Do it. If you really want to, put in the time, but be prepared. It's going to take a couple of years before maybe you see success on paper. And then my last tip would be to find a network of people in this industry. I wish I knew about some of the benefits from PBSA when I started this fight originally, because maybe it would have been a little shorter and maybe my stress level would have been a little less. And I didn't know that because I wasn't really involved. I hadn't gone to the conferences. I always thought, why would I network with more background check companies? That seems really silly. And now I realize, well, I was the one being silly because I didn't really see the benefits of it 5 years ago. So come to DC, come go to the annuals, even just, find some people on LinkedIn and do a Zoom with them. At least it's something, even if you can't come in person. Start cultivating those relationships.
Create a community. And we can end with that. I love that idea. And again, a lot of what we're doing at the collective is that. Thank you, Rebecca, for telling your story. You're so inspirational. And thank you guys for sticking around all the way until the end. I hope to see you at our LinkedIn community or on an in-person event. And until next time.